Good morning. Welcome to Chats with Champions. This speaker series is co-sponsored by Skidompha Public Library and Sherman's Maine Coast Bookstore. The next speaker in this series will be next Thursday. Liz Hellitzer from the Maine Holocaust Museum will be discussing human rights. If you would like to support this talk today and other talks in the chat series, there's a basket over on the side table awaiting your donations. Think about it. So that everyone may enjoy today's program, please take a moment to silence your phone and to any other electrical devices. Today's topic is ocean dumping, past, present, and future. When I first heard of this, I pictured those horrible pictures of dolphin snouts captured in the plastic six-pack containers, holders. The actual topic is just as bad and worse on a huge scale. Before the 1970s, the attitude worldwide was out of sight, out of mind. Everything not wanted on land was dumped in the ocean. Chemical and industrial waste, contaminated dredged materials, those non-biodegradable plastics, and even barrels of radioactive waste. And all this without any thought to their negative effects on the marine environment. Today, Jack Boak, a retired master mariner and marine activist, will describe these harmful practices in greater detail and explain the regulations which attempt to control them. Jack is well qualified to discuss this topic. He graduated from the U.S. Merchant Marine Academy with a bachelor's degree in nautical science. Then for over 40 years, he worked on various kinds of ships, from chemical tankers to research vessels and even a maritime training ship. During that time, he became interested in many issues that affected the marine world and had dozens of op-ed pieces published. Jack was born in Bath and grew up near Harpswell and Annapolis, Maryland. His wife Karen drew him to the Pemaquid Peninsula, and they bought their home on Muscongus Pond in 2002. Jack is heavily involved in the local community, serving on the Bremen Volunteer Fire Department, on the Bremen Planning Board, and on the board of Pemaquid Watershed Association. He also performs courtesy boat inspections and lake smart screening in his quest to help keep local waters and oceans healthy for our fisheries, residents, and visitors. Jack's topic today of ocean dumping could not be more timely. In this week's Time magazine, you probably have this version at home. There's a small blurb that quotes the UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, mentioning a recent study that warns that discarded plastic garbage in ocean water is on track to outweigh fish by 2050. It's incredible. Jack, please help us understand this issue.
Good morning. As I was preceded, I've been involved with dumping, watching it and being upset by it since I was an initial maritime. But anyway, waste in the ocean, trash in the water is anything caused to enter the marine ecosystem that is not native to the ecosystem, that causes it to become unhealthy or overwhelmed due to chemical breakdown or imbalance that can cause harm to the inhabitants of that ecosystem. Basically, you can't eat it. It's trash. And it's obviously vital for all ecosystems to remain healthy in order for the planet to remain healthy and balanced as was created by evolution. Pollution, they've been dumping since the beginning of time in water. One concept was dilution is the solution to pollution. That was the mantra that went on for millennia. And all trash from ships was dumped because they had to pay someone else to cart it away from in the docks. And so they just tossed it over the side. Then they got to nothing within 3 miles, but then the ships got 4 miles off the coast and they would dump it there. Trash, garbage, sewage, industrial waste. And based on the assumption the ocean would eat it all. And when I was a cadet, I was on a chemical tanker, and I was appalled that the chemical waste from washing the tanks out in preparation for the next cargo was just dumped over the side into the ocean. And when I took environmental law back in school, I did a thesis and I researched it and found that our government was selling permits to refineries to just take barge after barge of ethyl methyl bad stuff off the coast and dump it. And because they felt that it was cheaper for them or more profitable for them to just dump it in the ocean than to process it. And all these wastes could be recycled or burned, that was just totally unacceptable to me. In New York City, I found later, they were dumping sewage. They didn't want to they didn't want to spend the money to increase their sewage processing capabilities, so they had a vessel, and there was articles in the New York Times about what was referred to as the Dragon Lady, and this small tanker would fill up sewage, and they were supposed to take it out like 12 miles off the coast and dump it out, and then come back in and get another load. But in a request that she got paid per ton that she moved by the city, they would start dumping it as they were right after they left the dock. They'd open up the valve and start pumping it over the side. And eventually she went to jail for that. But nonetheless, that was unbelievable in my mind. So the ability of the government to give the permits was, I found, based on flawed research, in that they took a barge off of Cape May of ethyl methyl bad stuff, 60,000 barrels, and dumped it into the ocean, pumped it over the side, and 30 minutes later they took a surface sample of the ocean and it's gone. It's pure salt water. But then when I analyzed what was in the tank that they pumped over, it was heavier than salt water, so it sank to the bottom. And they did not take a bottom sample, but they were doing this for a long time, and after a few years, they started finding fish with sores and cancer, probably from what was going into the fertile coastal waters. And one of the conclusions I said was that they shouldn't be dumping it at all, but if they were, they should take it off away, past the continental shelf and dump it in deep water, so it would sink down into the depths of the ocean. But luckily, things eventually changed, and that's not how it works. But as people have seen the six-pack rings, possibly, but this is the animals out there. This is a turtle that thought that the plastic bag was a jellyfish and ate it, because they can't tell. And so that was a shame. Now, until even 1987, ships were still dumping plastic at sea. But when I was an able-bodied seaman on a ship, and it was all this, it was revolting to do that. So I actually went around the ship when we were in port, and I would collect the plastic, and I'd carry it over my shoulder and go into the tanker terminal and find a dumpster and put it in the dumpster so it would be processed properly. In 1988, European ports decided to move ahead and start collecting trash from the ships for proper disposal ashore. In the late 1980s, the United States finally accepted the notion that dumping of plastics was bad. And the Coast Guard started to enforce the rules because the United States was usually in the international scene. The United States was usually the last country, one of the last countries to sign on to international accords. So when they came on one ship and the guy was poking around through the food waste bucket and he found a cellophane cellophane from the cracker package and said, until you've done this, this, and this, the ship's not going to leave port. And so, we jumped through hoops and did that. Yes?
Why, do you have an opinion why the United States was last, always seemed to be last to sign on to these accords, different kind?
Money. For special interests to make profit. Internationally, it used to be that each country's ships and was controlled from the individual countries, but as the fight against flag inconvenient shipping, they internationalized the enforcement of regulations, and as such, they came up with MARPOL, maritime MARPOL and laws, and under the International Maritime Organization. But in order to have them implemented, they have to be ratified by so many countries that have a certain percentage of the tonnage, world tonnage, and then once they pass the point, then it becomes law. A big stickling point had been for garbage, for plastic and garbage, was that most of the countries in the world wanted to include the cost of processing ships' garbage as part of the port fee. That ships, when they come into port, they pay so much per foot that they take up the dock space per day, like rent. And they wanted to include that. The United States didn't want to do that. They said in order to allow the ports to be competitive, but indeed, by being available meant contractors to come down to the ship, and by American health laws, that was required to be packaged in sealed boxes, the ship's waste, and then carried to an incinerator in a special truck. So that way, because what if something got out, the ship, the waste came from outside the country, what if something got out into the public? There's a health concern. Other countries didn't do that. But, so therefore, they aren't recycling anything coming off ships in the United States. They have all sorts of, they've been working on trying to fight pollution for many decades. As each level, they come up with more ideas on how to make the world, the oceans a cleaner place. And then it takes a long time for things to dissolve in the oceans. And there's different sources of information, and sometimes there's little conflicts. But like I said, if you can't eat it, it's polluted, it's garbage and pollution. And then, of course, when I worked on chemical tankers, I found a lot of chemicals that they were dumping in the ocean had a half-life of 10,000 years. So therefore it takes that long for it to actually break down. So the bottle might be gone, but it hasn't really it's just broken into smaller pieces. In the latest garbage regulations on January 1st, 2013, it finally came against the law for any ship involved in international service to dump anything except food waste. Up until then, boxes. I was on ships and we would take our plastic over to Europe and we would put it ashore in Europe. We saved enough space in our trash containers for it to hold our plastics, and then we would dump it over there because it was free. As we're in the States, it was going to cost tens of thousands of dollars for, and of course when businesses it's all about making money. They have to watch every penny in order to make sure that they are that they are still profitable, stay able to stay in business. Here's a, in Europe they had different systems in each country, and I was on a ship going there when that regulation came into effect, and I had no guidance from the company, but I came up with a way for us to process everything on the ship in order to put it ashore and get it recycled. In Holland, they had a single stream system of taking everything from the ships. In England, they would have it flat down there, and you carry your stuff off the ship, and they had a guy telling you that goes in that bin, that goes in that bin. And so I've got this little film from the Netherlands that
all this waste is discarded from ships entering the port of Rotterdam. But only a third of the vessels unload their waste in port. So what happens to the other 2/3?
Young dad, we find them on the beaches. It has entangled itself in some thread-like materials. In this case, it looks like a potato net. And so they wrap it around their bill and it doesn't let loose anymore, so they cannot feed properly. They slowly die from starvation and end up at the beach.
Biologist Jan Andries van Franeker is concerned. Jan Andries monitors the impact our waste from land and sea has on both wildlife and the environment. So what's the scale of the waste problem? After making a sweep of only 40 square meters, this is the result. Based on regular waste collection, the overall statistics are not hard to calculate. The estimated amount of waste that ends up just in the North Sea is more than 20,000 tons each year. But there is good news, and it's coming from here. Rotterdam, one of the world's largest ponds.
Can everyone hear this?
No. Not well.
Not really.
Do we know how to, because I thought that when I tested before we had more volume.
This is the nerve centre of the port of Rotterdam. The port of Rotterdam is one of the major ports in Western Europe. On a yearly basis, we have 33,000 ocean-going vessels visiting our port, and in total we have about 1 million ship movements. Before an ocean-going vessel enters the port of Rotterdam, she has to send an electronic notification to the harbour master 24 hours in advance. And the notification includes the ETA, so that is the estimated time of arrival, the draft, the cargo, and so on. Here, everything comes together. Every detail of every ship that enters here is on record. How long it will stay, what cargo it carries, and what's to be unloaded. And that includes the waste.
Almost everything is recyclable. So every port should have the possibilities, and Rotterdam has, to receive waste from ships. And Rotterdam really wants to be a port who accepts all those wastes from the ships.
Efficiency is key here. As every minute counts, the waste has to be removed as normal port business is conducted.
The port is alive, day and night. In the middle of the night, the Adrian Mask arrives. Loading and unloading starts the moment it moors and goes on for hours. At the same time, life on board takes its course. In the kitchen, the meal is prepared. A ship is a small town. It's a well-oiled machine, operating continually, producing waste continually. Not only at the dinner table. The supplies are wrapped and need to be unpacked. Machine room maintenance is a continuous job, generating a lot of oily rags and oil waste. At the Adrian Mask, all waste is meticulously separated. While being loaded and unloaded, the ship is approached on the other side by a small vessel, ready to take its waste and process it. At the same time, the inspector arrives to see if everything is properly being taken care of.
We have mobile inspection teams in our port, inspectors visiting the ships, and they're also checking the waste log on board of vessels. And if they see something which is not correct, they inform Port State Control, and Port State Control has the possibility to detain the vessel.
This waste has just been collected from ships that are at sea for months at a time. Just imagine the effect of all this waste dumped into the oceans. Jan Andries van Franeker doesn't need to imagine it. He monitors the effects daily.
This is a fulmer, northern fulmer. It's a member of the albatross family, birds that live out at sea all the time. Unlike gulls, they do not come ashore to feed. They only feed out at sea. And so by looking at their stomach contents, we can check how things are out at sea, whether it's getting cleaner or dirtier, or whether we in the southern North Sea have a more dirty area than way up to the north. So it's a monitoring instrument for marine litter.
From all areas around the North Sea, dead farmers are being sent to Jan Andries' land. The birds are measured, their condition, sex and age are registered. It's not hard to find the cause of death.
You can already feel it has died slowly from starvation. So it has used all its fat and even muscle tissue before it died.
This strange lump is found in the stomach.
It looks like a big lump of paraffin, which is discharged by a lot of ships when cleaning the hulls.
Washing out the stomach, Jan Andries finds out what this one dead farmer mistook for food in the open sea.
This one, I assume, died from the big lump of paraffin in the stomach. It was like a big cork blocking the stomach, the passage from the stomach to the gut. So it just died from hunger.
But there is more in this bird.
It looks like a piece of onion skin. So a lot of carry waste from ship. There's fragments from bottles or toys or hard pieces of plastic. There are a lot of industrial granules like these items. They are the raw product in which plastic is made. There's not much foam in this one. It's all hard, mostly hard types of plastic. And then, like for example, thread-like plastics, pieces of nylon wire here. These birds seem to be flying around quite happily, but almost every one of these forms that you see flying around carries plastic in its stomach, carries chemicals in its tissues, and so the level of impact we have is scary.
But there are new initiatives that give some hope to the health of the sea and its inhabitants. This ship, the OD6 from Stellendam, fishes for more than just fish. It also fishes for litter.
Dit is van 1,5 dag. We zijn hier zondagnacht mee begonnen en nou, dat is nu van 1,5 dag. Meestal hebben we zo rond de 400 kilo gemiddeld per week. En dat 50 weken in een jaar. Dus dat is een flinke hoeveelheid. We doen in totaal denk ik zo'n 5 à 6 jaar mee. En ik schat zo ongeveer dat we 150 ton vuil hebben opgevist in een jaar. We zien wel op sommige plekken waar we veel vissen, dat het daar absoluut minder gaat worden nu. Alleen in de drukke scheepvaartroutes, daar zie je toch wel dat het een beetje blijft. Maar ja, daar varen natuurlijk veel schepen, dus ja, er zal ook meer overboord gezet worden.
Dat was nog een oud weghaakje van vroeger. Dat we hier toen gewoon ook weggegooid, is afgebroken. Nou pakken we het op en we gooien het netjes in de zak. Dus er is echt wel verschil met vroeger. Misschien was ik het wel die een beet had aan tube shape. Nu doe ik dat niet meer. Zo is het gewoon. Niks meer en niks minder.
In less enlightened days, all this would end up in the sea. Now there is no excuse for throwing it overboard, given the facilities available. If it's retrieved, the birds don't suffer, and the fishermen don't waste time recatching it in their nets.
On the one hand, you need to create a clean environment for your employees who work in the port and the people who live in the port. And at the same time, we should create a mind shift and not always translate sustainability into costs. but see if you can get revenue streams out of it.
What are the revenues generated by waste? The processing costs money, but the raw materials are not lost. They will become new products. Almost everything gets a new life. In the end, only 7% is good for nothing. The other waste that can't be recycled is disposed of here. It's heading for incineration, so even the most useless waste is eventually turned into energy.
In principle, waste is also money because it can be reused again. But it means discipline on board of a ship to really look at what kind of waste do you produce and how do you deliver that waste in a port and not in the sea.
This is one of the places where young sailors learn just that. In a 3-day course, students of the maritime academies, like this one at IJmuiden, focus on sustainability in shipping in lessons and workshops.
What we basically try to do is first of all give them information, but mostly give them the opportunity to exchange ideas and to process the information. Because it's the information that's important, but it's even more important is the way that they perceive the information. They need to take it away and become responsible. We are convinced that awareness is not just knowledge, it's not just knowing, but it's about what you do with it. So you need to give participants time to discuss amongst themselves and to think about what it means for them in their daily lives and in their future on board ships. We realize it's not just innovations and regulations that do the trick, but that we need to give people the tools, old people and new people, to take responsibility and to know what the problems are and to know what they can do to solve those problems. Because the marine litter problem is not a very difficult problem, and just keep it on board.
Here we find a guillemot, and this one clearly died from oil pollution. There's a large patch all over the side here, and also a bit in the wings that is fouled with oil, which means the plumage is not waterproof anymore, and so it dies from cold, and it uses too much energy to keep warm and to feed.
We're all familiar with images of oil victims. It's a heartbreaking sight. How many more reasons do we need to responsibly dispose of our waste oil and chemicals? Tankers have to clean their holds after unloading, often producing hazardous liquids. The disposal of this liquid waste is a task for a highly specialized ship like this one, the Hydrovac 10. She's equipped with several separated tanks and a double hull for safety. The captain of the hydrovac already knows what kind of waste the next ship on his list has to unload. The moment it moors, the captain gets a message and he's on his way. All ships have bilge water and sludge to dispose of. Sometimes the hydrovac also takes in the cleaning water from the hold, often contaminated with chemicals. No risks are taken here. For every load, 2 samples are taken, one for the captain of the ship unloading and one for the captain of the hydrovac. Forms are checked and signed for the captain of the hydrovac to take with him. Every litre of load is accounted for. The loaded hydrovac then heads for the recycling plant. There, the plant too takes samples. The samples are taken to the lab to be analysed. At the same time, the paperwork is taken care of and the load is officially handed over. At the lab, every chemical is isolated. Again, no risks are taken, because the factory works with living bacteria to process the oily water waste. But first the oil has to be extracted. That is what happens here. Chemicals are added to thicken the oil and allow it to come to the surface, where it can easily be removed. The recently harvested dirty oil gets a second life in this factory, where it's used as a fuel for cleaning dirty soil. And this is where the last step takes place. Cleaning of the leftover dirty water. It's done by microscopic workers, bacteria. Once free of toxins, the water is clean enough for it to be transported to a standard water purifying plant, to end up in the open water.
You can gradually see that there's less birds with oil in their feathers on the beaches, which, considering the fact that there's higher intensity of shipping, is a good sign that in the long run, if you pay enough attention and create awareness, that it does help.
Awareness is realizing that every tiny bit of plastic and every drop of oil in an ocean of water has some effect. Plastic is staying there forever, breaking down in tiny little pieces, ending up in birds and fish, and eventually maybe even ending up in us. The answer to this couldn't be simpler. With the right facilities at the end of a journey, all the ships have to do is hold on to their waste until they arrive.
So you think that the problem's solved because they've got this pollution now? Well, that's not, I mean, because they've got the system to no longer. Regretfully, that's not the case. And this is what we used to have cans of plastic on board the ship. We would tie it down, and then when we got to Europe, we put it ashore because it was free. as we're in the States, we call us.
My motivation is driven by the fact that I love the sea and I love to be at sea. Since I was a little boy and now I'm a grown-up boy, but I still enjoy every minute of it.
I've been scuba diving for the last 30 odd years, and I've witnessed.
Sorry, thank you. And but food scraps, even there, like they said, with onion skins. But indeed, when you're close in, you have to commutate, like run through a garbage disposal before stuff goes over the side. But like I said, today the stuff coming off the ship is negligible compared to the way it used to be, because now they have to put it all ashore in every port, and they have garbage logs, and they have to account for everything. And it's kind of interesting, but I was in Spain some years ago, and when had been in Italy, the previous port, they'd have this boat come along, they'd have a guy come on the ship and toss the garbage bags into the boat, and they'd take it to shore someplace and process it. And I didn't know we received a receipt. Every time you put something ashore like you saw there, you get a receipt. And so I was thinking, how much garbage, when they came on in Spain to check our logs, I was thinking, how much garbage did they take off in Italy? And I guesstimated 11 cubic meters. And then the thing was that they gave me grief because the receipt said 11.2 cubic meters. And I had only written down 11 cubic meters. And I got in trouble for that. I mean, just reprimanded. And I thought I did a darn good job by guesstimating 11 cubic meters of stuff going off. And the paperwork is very important, because that's one paper trail is a way that they can track everything, and get enough computers you can calculate how much is made. But accidental pollution, one of the exceptions for dumping stuff out at sea is if it's the safety of the ship is endangered, because of course safety, this all comes under the safety of life at sea. So if people can get injured, then or the ship could sink, then that's not a good thing.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Why not incinerate at sea?
That's a good question, because we used to have an incinerator on board the ship, but they were worried about, I guess, the scrubbers. Ships are notoriously not having, like, for example, you go to Baltimore, they take everything and anything, and they've got a huge garbage incinerator machine that they make electricity with in downtown Baltimore. And that is the cleanest way of getting rid of it, because they use scrubbers to capture all of the ash and soot and everything. But I guess they don't have enough of them in the world or I guess they haven't made enough small ones to bring the cost down.
And one more question. I was absolutely stunned at that biologist handling dead birds, dissecting, not moving clumps.
I was too.
I could not believe that.
But I guess that some people have heebie-jeebies, and sometimes you can get too, just like little kids. If they're kept away from dust, they end up not building up resistance, and they end up becoming allergic to everything when they get older. So I wouldn't want to touch them. Yes.
Can these regulations be undone voluntarily by our politicians?
They can try to do it in this country, but the International Maritime Organization, their intent with the garbage regulations was to get everybody to recycle, because what they want is everybody to recycle everything as much as possible. In Holland, they've got no place to have landfills. So therefore, that's why they recycle, and they create a revenue stream and try to use every single thing up. But in our country, we're no longer big dog on the block. I mean, internationally, we have American flag ships are like a very small percentage of the ships in the world, and indeed, if the United States tried to go too far, I mean, they can voluntarily not enforce laws in the United States, letting ships dump stuff in the waters off the coast if they want to, and pollution, which I hope doesn't happen going backwards, but They could, but the International Maritime Organization in the world could actually put sanctions on the United States, say, you know, like, because they have port state control in every world. They can come on board the ship. Before I retired, the last thing was that they could actually come on the ship and compare work log hours with overtime sheets. And they said, why did the logs only say it took 3 hours, but they got 5 hours of overtime to do it? Or because they're limited by how many hours everybody can work now, it's because they're so concerned about fatigue. Americans generally, they got overtime, they're making extra money, and that kind of like gave them the adrenaline to keep on going. But so things have really changed. A lot of stuff still ends up, I mean, like things get blown off boats and when they're not properly disposed of. And this is me in the Round Pond Parade some years ago with stuff I picked up from La Verna, the rocks off La Verna, and my wife and I created this gallon with the fish nets and stuff that we had collected in the bottles. But you know, things end up all the time, but sometimes they get blown over the side. And on ships now, it's kind of interesting, but one of the rules in international is that if something blows off your ship, you're almost obligated to go back and get it. And now they have fast rescue boats that they can actually put in the water and go back and get something. But there's no one out there actually watching. But there's all these little things, you know, people just, you know, it can happen all the time. Like I said, you know, the half-life of chemicals. But you know, people throwing stuff out the window. America, I found, is the trashiest country in the world. You know, and you see it just right down the street. People go to McDonald's, they're heading, and they decide, I'm going to grab a burger on the way home. My wife doesn't want me to be eating this stuff, so they get halfway down the road, they finish it, out the window, they throw all the trash because they don't want to be caught at home. They get in trouble there. I mean, they think that the wife can't smell the cigarette smoke on the breath or the remains of the meat. But so it all ends up going downhill. Non-plastic debris is poisonous to life in the ocean. Not a bullet to the head, but a slow, torturous death. I mean, just like the loons, if they eat a lead weight, they end up deteriorating and cause them to die over a period of weeks. But now it's even gotten worse. Industry has decided we have these little microbeads. Let's use this plastic, put them in toothpaste, cosmetics, and you wash them, they go down the drain. They end up they end up going through the filters because they're so small. They don't even get caught by the filters when the fresh, clean water ends up going into the bay. Fortunately, they're I mean, too late. I mean, it's kind of late in my mind, but this is one that could be undone. Beginning July of this year, the law will phase out the manufacture of microbeads, and by 2019 it will completely halt the distribution of all cosmetic and personal care products containing microbeads. But you know, these little beads, they're so small. But the thing is that animals can eat them very easily, and they think they're fish. They don't know. And but you know, these are pictures of stuff that they found in the Chesapeake Bay, and a lot of that, you know, goes washed down storm drains and out into the bay, and then all over the world you get this junk that ends up going out in the oceans, and then this is trash collected from the Charles River in Boston. You know, that's not coming from the ocean, that's coming from inland. People just throw it out and, oh, Mom finished this soda, just throw it out. It used to be the way. And then PWA, coastal cleanup, they, you know, try to clean up areas and look at tires, everything. And all that stuff is not good. And this is, you may have heard of the gyres out in the middle of the ocean. And this is a big Great Pacific garbage patch there, shown on a map. But indeed, it's all over the world. As you see, all these, this is all caused by the Coriolis effect, how the planet rotates and the waters circulate like this, and they end up in the middle. This is where the Sargasso Sea, you know, with the seaweed, It would stay there, it's like, now it's full of garbage. Out here, up in the Pacific, in the Indian Ocean, and like every ocean has that because of the Coriolis effect, and it cycles into it. And it's just terrible. And then they, in the United States, they've come up with, the EPA has came up with a national pollution discharge elimination system, of which people on board ships had to get a certification. You had to take classes, or you had to take self-study and pass a test. So that way you end up knowing that you had to, believe it or not, if you took boiling water and dumped it into the ocean, you had to make a record that that was done, because that changes the ocean. Because it's not just the water, it's also the heat. But also, and then, because they're trying to cause people to be aware of how pesticides on fields end up draining into the waterways that go into the ocean. And you know, if there's any like evidence that something came off your vessel and there's no record of it, then you get in real trouble, because that's almost like falsifying records. And so everybody could do something to reduce the problem of plastic waste in the ocean. You know, we've been moving in that direction with plastic bags, and you know, at the store we encourage to bring your shopping bags to do it. I mean, like this, we're way ahead back in Europe. Back in the 80s, first they started charging for plastic bags, then they made them totally illegal, but they'd have their boxes and that food came in, and so like you could get a box and put it in there and carry it out of the store, or you reused your bags. And then I was in Germany at the supermarket, and they asked me if I wanted something in German, and I said, bitte. That means, yeah, please. And it turned out it was a cloth bag, and it would cost me an extra nickel, you know, but it had a nice design painted by school kids on it, and it was very strong, durable bag. And so that was, you know, I had to figure this out, how it proceeded. And then like beer bottles, people have cases of beer at home rather than cans that they crush and throw away. And with their bottles, the way each brewery makes their own beer, and they have the bottles, and they sell it like in cases, like plastic holders that hold 25 bottles in it. And so you get a couple of them, you pay a deposit on both of them, but then when you finish one off, you take the empties back to where you buy your next one, and so you just swap it out, so you never have to pay. You only have to pay for the deposits one time, and then they take the empty bottles and they have them already in the plastic cases, and holders, and they stick them in the truck, and they take them back to the brewery, and they go through and they put them through and wash them and sanitize them, and then refill it, new caps, new labels, and then they send them back. So therefore, it's a very energy efficient process for processing, you know, for getting the beer bottles. In the States, they take the bottles and they crush them, and they melt them, and then they make new things, and that's a huge amount of energy. I mean, and like all my ship was officially dry by company policy, and as you may remember, the Exxon Valdez and stuff drinking, but they have rules, and some ships I saw where they would have the engineers would get together like for a debriefing at the end of the day to discuss work, and they'd have a beer. Well, they had, you know, so they never went over, and they never got intoxicated, but they might have a beer or a beverage. Some people didn't drink beer, and so they would save the bottles in the cases, and then when they went back to Germany, they would send the empties ashore, they'd bring them, and they'd bring full ones back. So, you know, it's very easy to do, and it would be nice if microbreweries did that. So potential solutions to correct the trash in the environment, the slurry of plastics in the ocean. I think that there's possibly a way of using robotics just like lawnmowers going out and collecting it and then processing it, and maybe having one mothership to control the smaller vessels, and then processing them in the debris that they filter out of the water and make plastic beads that they can recycle and make something else out of them, rather than waiting until they break down in the ocean. And then, of course, we
Can I ask
have,
a different question, please?
okay,
Container ships.
yes,
There's tons and tons of container ships that lose containers overboard during the year.
mm-hmm.
It's rough seas, Genesis, whatever. How's that reported? Do you report that the location went over and warn other ships in the area? They don't always sink.
Yes, sometimes they do send them out, send out a, if they're aware of it, then they send out an alert. But I've seen hatch covers that had washed off the ships. They weren't properly secured. I saw it floating around, and I reported that. I saw it. But the containers, a lot of times with the ships, you know, if you're lucky, it'll just deflect as the ship is going along. but they do go over the side, and that's why they're internationally, the regulations, they try to keep, you know, say, sorry, the ship can't leave, it's not secure. And the insurance companies, they're the one. But the future of ocean waste, global warming is a huge problem with regards to trash, because of course, I've been seeing the waters rise. In Chesapeake Bay, the water comes up a foot higher now at high tide than it did 50 years ago. And I've seen the ice caps, I've seen the ice melt in the North Atlantic Ocean from the Greenland ice cap. It is coming up. In my professional opinion, it's important to not issue any permits to allow construction of infrastructure within, let's say, at least 10 feet of the current sea level, and maybe 20, because look at, you get a tidal wave, some storm surge, and it causes, because eventually all infrastructure should be relocated inland into a higher level, because of asphalt roads, maybe cement a little bit, but the wiring, but it needs to be a worldwide triage movement to move to relocate infrastructure inland, because otherwise it's all poison, and it'll poison the oceans, and it'll end up poisoning the world, because it can't live like that. So, and it needs to be done before sea levels rises, and there has been evidence that there's been sudden jumps, like over a period of 6 months of 2 or 3 meters from, and it looks like from the collapse of the western half of the Antarctic ice sheet, because you don't know that but it's warming up slowly, and then it all of a sudden collapses, and then everything else can have gravity pull it towards the ocean, and of course that'll increase pollution with more stuff. And then having laws like in OBX, like insurance, Outer Banks down in the Carolinas, the houses, you see all these new houses, but they're designed to fall down, because if there's a hurricane, if they only get damaged, insurance won't pay. If they fall down, they'll pay to rebuild. And the subsidy of businesses for their destruction is something that we've got to stop doing. The warmer world will cause ice to melt, which will raise sea levels, more trash in the environment. And since most international trade takes place on the seas, seaports will be unusable. And due to the nature of international trade, there will be a serious shortage of food and supplies, leading to possibly war and death if we do have a rise, because 10 feet, most ports won't be able to, like as it turned out, they had to rewire the port of New York when Hurricane Sandy came in and flooded it, because they weren't expecting the water to get that high, and it shorts out all the 440 volt systems and plus. So one thing is to create a revenue stream in order to pay for it. And relocation of infrastructure should take place on a proactive scale, not reimbursing owners for loss of use. But the responsibility for that loss is stupidity of people building by the ocean. I've noticed in the Mediterranean, if you look there, you have ancient cities and stuff, they weren't down by the seafront. They were up on the cliff, they were up on the hill. And they would go down to the water when weather was good, and even the Indians around there, they didn't live down by the water. They lived inland. They would come down in the summertime and enjoy the rivers and the seafood, but then they went inland in the wintertime when the seas got rough. So it's a matter of humans living within their means. That's any questions? Well, this is the conclusion of my talk this morning.
Thank you for thoroughly depressing me.
I'm sorry about that. I just watch evening news also. That can fill. Yes, ma'am.
I'm trying to understand the international, how much the international regulations really can control, especially the third world, poorer parts of the world. Do countries all have to sign on? Do some not sign on? What happens?
Syria and North Korea. I mean, but even then, they come into a port and they are now subject to the laws, and they get shut down. They get tied up, and they don't let them leave. Like remember that North Korean ship that was taking missiles from Cuba to North Korea, and it was stopped in the Panama Canal. The Panamanian port authorities didn't used to be able to do that, but they allowed everyone to be able to watch everybody else. And they opened up the ship and they made them take out the cargo, and they found it in the bottom. I mean, you know, a long time ago I was in Turkey, and someone apparently talked about they had successfully exported all these antiquities, but the thing is, they didn't realize the ship went from Istanbul to Izmir to Iskenderun. We get to Iskenderun, and the police came down to the ship, and they made us take the container out of the bottom of the ship, and they opened it up on deck, and all these beautiful paintings and sculptures and all this stuff, and it was called household goods. They were trying to smuggle it out of the country. So that was, even back then, but that was that was in the same country. But internationally, they can do that. Like I said, they can come on board and check the records, overtime records, and then of course they offer a whistleblower, immunity. And so if a crew member, everybody's got cell phones. Call up and say something.
There are not countries that have excluded themselves.
Well, they can exclude themselves in their own country, but they can only do it in their backyard. They can't do it in others, and and then of course there's trade sanctions. There's all sorts of ways of influencing other countries, such as, let's say the United States does some things and the world is unhappy with the United States. They can all of a sudden penalize countries for having ships come into the United States and say, make it to the point, we've got the United States had been the premier currency in the world, but then you have Russia, Brazil, they've got another two, China and India. They've got lots of money, and they're trying to come up with a stable alternative to the US dollar and international currency. And so there's international diplomacy can put have a serious hammer. It might take a while for it to happen, but yes and no. Why?
Does the Coast Guard have responsibility for enforcing dumping within its jurisdiction, and if so, how effective is it?
It's the Coast Guard does have, that's their jurisdiction, and they come on board and check the garbage logs, and if they know about how they've got studies and stuff that how much garbage and different categories are generated by the ship, and they want to know what's going on, where it's going to. And since they have to, and because if they come on board and they find any falsification, all of a sudden they'll take Chief Mate off the ship in handcuffs in the New York Minute, or the captain. That's one of the things that the United States also is very traditionally, that unless there's negligence, captains try their best, but the rest of the world wanted to say that captains, or the crew members could not be jailed for something that their company made them do or something like that. And the United States said no, we're going to jail them. And so a ship that had an accident in Mobile, Alabama, and the engine failed and ended up killing somebody, and they took the captain off and put him in jail. And this generally used to only happen in third world countries, but the United States, the Coast Guard actually went to an international meeting to rewrite this, and they offered this idea as to how to write it up as a way to encourage people, you know, to hold them responsible, but not. And and then they got back, and I believe it was in the Obama administration, they said, no, we can't. And so they had to go back and apologize at the next meeting and say, we take that off the table. Our government did not agree with that, so. Yes?
What are they doing about Agent Orange runoff in South Vietnam? And what are they doing about Monsanto company's policies of fertilization of land in India? And what are they going to do about the fact